Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon, and I'm the Dean of Graduate Studies at Charles Darwin University, and welcome to Outrider 4. What is a researcher? Now, obviously, this is a request from Ruth. Thank you to Ruth. And this particular Outrider, what is a researcher, is paired with our last one, what is research? So what we're investigating is how research is poured into a human form and how that human being is supported, cared for, but also trained and verified. This is a really exciting, interesting topic, and I'm so grateful to have the chance to share it with you. So let's do this. What is a researcher? Now, etymologically, the word researcher comes from Old French, from the word searcher, and it was first used in 1544. So it's got an incredibly long history, and it is an incredibly interesting history. And I wanted to start, if I can, with a meaningful and motivational definition of the term for you. And this definition emerged when I was a young Jedi. When I was a young Jedi researcher, I had just gained my PhD. I just graduated from my PhD, and the first book I read after I completed the PhD to welcome my new research career was this particular book. And it was by Booth, Collum and Williams. And it was called The Craft of Research, published in 1995 by Chicago University Press. And Booth, Collum and Williams stated, and this has stayed with me through my entire life really, that research is a conversation. It's a conversation between a researcher and our scholarly community, between a researcher and our disciplines or fields. Changes your life just a little bit, doesn't it? So the goal of this conversation is to free citizens from ignorance, from fear, from the pretenders, and from the fear mongers. So our role, therefore, as a researcher, is to dialogue with our peers to enable strong and clear decision-making from citizens. Our role is to transform information into knowledge and make it resonant and meaningful for citizens so that they're not impacted by the pretenders and the influencers. Now, if that definition doesn't make you want to get up in the morning and change the world, like, oh yes, that's who I am. I am a researcher. If that doesn't make you want to get going, then I'm not sure what pharmaceuticals you're actually going to require. Because, colleagues, there is a nobility to research and there is nobility to being a researcher. Similarly, Huff in her 2009 book, Designing Research for Publication, and again I strongly recommend that book to you, focused again on the importance of this scholarly conversation. And she defined a researcher's goal as, quote, finding the right conversation, end of quote, and described research as, quote, a social, sense-making conversation. End of quote. These are brilliant definitions. They still get me going and get me excited. So Huff stressed the importance of the scholar and the researcher as an identity. So when we, as a human, make a decision to claim the identity of a researcher, we identify, we confirm that making strong scholarly choices is important to us, and we don't just offer a vibe, that we move through life as a researcher seeking and asking for validation and confirmation of our evidence, our research, and our arguments. Therefore, as you can see, a researcher has an incredibly powerful role, and what a researcher does in many ways is link the past and the present. And we link that through scholarly conversations. we try and build the relationship between the past of knowledge and the present of knowledge. And the reason we're doing that is to create new knowledge for the future. But we also must, the whole point of being a researcher is we must recognise the importance of verification. So us having an idea is great, but being a researcher means that we demand that colleagues check and verify the work that we do. Put another way, this is why we have a literature review, this is why we have a methodology, and this is why we put our work through peer review. Being a researcher, and this is so important now, can I say, being a researcher is not about expressing emotion, it's not about expressing an opinion, it's not about expressing a vibe, it's not about occupying an identity and assuming that that particular identity narrative has truth. Instead, it is activating a very precise, very clearly configured intellectual space. We build with transparency a pathway through knowledge, and that pathway is checked by other scholars. That is the nature of the conversation. Now, these other people that are going to check our work can be peer reviewers, but of course they're also PhD examiners. As researchers, we must be checked. And that verification process is part of an intellectual community building knowledge. The challenge, I think, so often that we have is, I believe passionately in these goals, the highest standards of intellectual life, the highest standards of scholarship. And I think it is a tragedy, a personal and professional tragedy, every time any of us go below those standards. And that can occur through sexual assault, sexual harassment, research integrity, research misconduct issues, bullying, but also, the stuff we rarely talk about and we should talk about a lot more, the gatekeeping of knowledge and also intellectual jealousy. And that's why ethics and decency and regulation and governance are required. We are only a researcher because we are held accountable to and with the community of researchers. You can never be sort of a researcher on your own. We are only a researcher because we are verified as a researcher by others. While most researchers are still housed in our universities, research and development, we'll use the phrase research and development, they are both integral to public and private corporations, businesses, SMEs. And of course, this includes government laboratories, but also the GLAMs, galleries, libraries, archives and museums, consultancies, and also environmental agencies as well. Researchers, therefore, are employed through a diversity of organisations. About 60% of our PhD students do not work in universities. They leave our universities for other modes of employment. And so therefore, the reason research matters, particularly to public and private corporations, is because research renders those corporations competitive and allows them to compete well with other organisations. The researcher is important because we are information professionals. I think we very rarely talk about that these days. We are information professionals. What we do is transform information into knowledge through methodology, epistemology, ontology. And what we do is we deploy clear methodologies to find, to create, to locate, to curate data sets. And then we analyse those data sets and we prepare them for consumption and engagement via diverse communities. As you can see, therefore, researchers have very precise responsibilities, and we need to talk a lot about the responsibilities of researchers, because we are assigned or we seek out a particular research topic, research question, research area, and that often aligns with the priorities of a particular industry or a particular government or nation at a specific time. But from that topic, we develop a research plan. Now, in Outrider 2, we talked about the research proposal. And look, the research plan and research proposal have a lot of overlap because really they're about organisation and understanding how to manage information, knowledge, other human beings, ethics, and also resources, time and money. So a researcher continues to iteratively circulate the knowledge that is activated in that research. So dissemination is crucial to being a researcher. We provide updates on our research via conferences or blogs or podcasts or videos such as this, Nitros of course, and we make sure that our data sets and data collections are always tested and verified and improved. So we iteratively look, have we got the right data set? How can we improve our information literacy and our information collection strategies? And then of course we develop those strong strategies for dissemination to diverse, and I'll use the weird word, stakeholders. Researchers are qualified. And one of the reasons they're qualified is they participate in research training. Research training is a weird phrase, and in a future Outrider, I'm going to take that phrase on. I think the better phrase, to be frank, is research education. But the research education that we as researchers activate and share is about theory, it's about methodology, it's about evidence, it's also about dissemination protocols and ethics. We also, through research education, talk about reading, and we talk about writing and the technical skills that are required in many disciplines. So in the experimental sciences, theoretical sciences, fieldwork-based sciences, or indeed in high theory. That's what we talk about. Being a researcher, therefore, is intensely specialised without apology. We hold bachelor degrees, master's degrees, doctoral degrees, and we gain diverse experiences from around the world. We are internationally checked for our research. We understand diverse research cultures, and we continue to test and check ourselves every single year via peer review. There are also some other important skills. We've got to do budget management, time management. There may be leadership skills there. More importantly, there may be followership skills there, but also information literacy skills, communication studies, communication skills. And that's why so many of us as researchers don't stop at our PhD. We activate further qualifications, micro-credentials, or often what's called nano learning. Because a researcher is able to continue to innovate and to create and curate and transform with a singular goal: to improve knowledge. How amazing is this? Part of what a researcher must do is learn to recognise and learn to manage bias and learn to manage errors. Bias and errors, if you're alive, if you're breathing, you're going to have bias and you're going to have errors. But we learn to manage and acknowledge those biases and those errors by a very tight combination between methodology, epistemology, and ontology. And we continually revise that relationship. Researchers learn to control and manage and understand our subjectivities. Subjectivity, not a problem, but you must acknowledge it, you must control it and manage it. It is a lens to research, and you must understand how that lens operates in terms of developing your research outputs. Scientific researchers, of course, have the scientific method that validates and tries to manage subjectivity and bias. And of course, that's the scientific method from observation to hypotheses, working definitions, start to deploying your scientific equipment, then getting the data set, doing the analysis, going back to the hypothesis and saying, you know what, the hypothesis was wrong, and going through the whole process again. So that scientific method is a great way to manage and acknowledge and work through bias and subjectivity. The social scientists, of course, have diverse methodologies working through, say, ethnography or fieldwork or participant observation. And particularly in the social sciences, the imperative is to create those reactive data sets through interviews or through surveys. Ethics is crucial in the sciences, but particularly I would argue the social sciences. And I'll tell you why. Because the investigations that are done in the social sciences are important, but are often very timely and are very, very hot topics. And that's great. But the problem with the very timely hot topics is that they can do great harm to the participants. So all this social scientific rigour must be tempered by respect for citizens. Any research, any researcher must respect deeply the life of citizens. Okay. Humanities and arts research and researchers, wow, this is a very, very wide field, but researchers in these disciplines at its most basic are very involved in thinking about context. And that context may be theoretical context, intellectual context, social, economic, political, geographical context. So the humanities and the social sciences terribly interested in thinking about how context operates in our changing views and the emergence of knowledge. So, for example, historians deploy very intricate epistemologies to try and look at the granular relationship between the past and the present and build that relationship, very intricate, like skin, delicate skin between the past and the present. High theory and high theoretical research is absolutely crucial. Very, very difficult, and we need to acknowledge the importance of the high theory and the high theoreticians amongst our researchers who construct mind furniture and move our mind furniture around. Brilliant, inspirational human beings. And of course, art-based research is important here. Some of this is based in studio, so studio-based research, but also practice-led, practice-based, creative-led, creative-based, often involving the construction of artefacts and exegeses. And again, the relationships between artifact and exegeses and what happens in that space is incredibly interesting for a researcher to explore. So what aligns all of this research is a commitment to research ethics. And in Australia, we have a code for research conduct, which must be the punctuation of every second, of every minute, of every hour of the research that we do. But can I say most national systems around the world, to all our friends around the world who are joining us, you also have clear ethical parameters. And in the United States, for example, the National Review Act was formed in 1974, and so institutions still uphold that legislation to this day, which is incredibly inspirational. Research ethics is concerned with what happens to people or animals or documents or the environment, and what happens to those people and environment and animals during the research process. Axiology is the frame and the guide through research ethics. At its most basic, what axiology does is it balances the values of the researcher, the research, and citizens. And so it carefully ensures, so values matter a lot here, and how we balance those values between diverse stakeholders is the key of axiology. Very precious, very important. So therefore, researchers must endlessly check their research design, particularly when it's involving human beings or animals or the environment. Medical research, of course, is guided through a series of ethical codes, as we would hope, starting with, of course, the Nuremberg Code in 1947, moving through the Declaration of Helsinki in 1964, and the Belmont Report in 1978. So through these governance protocols, research ethics becomes the foundation of medical research and applied science more generally. So as you can see, research training, yucky phrase, but research education must include foundationally attention to research ethics, but also academic and research integrity. And that includes, particularly, it starts with monitoring data and ensuring that the fabrication of data is not enacted and authorship is respected and logged. So the challenges, I think, that are going to emerge for you, our researchers of the future, are very, very clear. We've got the research ethics and the methodologies around using public posts. So say, for example, you want to cite a public Twitter post, or you're on Facebook and someone has made a post public. They have made a decision to render a post public. Now, the interesting research ethics conversations at the moment are involving the circulation of public posts from social media. And can I acknowledge my wonderful former student, Dr. Leanne McRae, who is doing some amazing intellectual work in this space. And Leanne, I need you to write this work up for us, okay? So these are the new and emerging debates around research ethics. And of course, then there are the challenges with peer review. And I'm going to get really stroppy about this, for which I apologise, but I get angry about this every day. Peer review is crucial to building those blocks, building that conversation between an individual researcher and their intellectual community. That's where we started our definitional work today. But we've seen in so many recent controversies that there are a series of gatekeepers in our disciplines who are keeping out new voices, keeping out the innovative ideas to maintain their own power. And the other key problem and challenge we've got in the maintenance of the integrity of peer review is what is happening to higher education and our universities at the moment. It breaks my heart every single day. Look, a tear just popped out. Isn't that unbelievable? Research, colleagues, is conducted in the long term. A PhD is a 3-year degree. You are enrolling to complete a PhD in 3 years. But the challenge with that is that supervisors are being hired who are not on a 3-year contract. So your supervisors may be rendered redundant by the organisation, may be restructured out of the organisation, or they may be on a contract, casual or 0-hour contract. Right. And of course, these contracts are creating great instability, as does, I'm going to go there, the differentiation of academic functions. So in the last 10 years, particularly in the last 5 years, all sorts of new contracts have arrived in academic life. So now we have a group of colleagues that are called teaching-only academics or teaching-focused academics. Now, I've fought that. I've lost, I always lose, but can I ask you a question, and you can ponder it in your own life in the next week. If an academic is not research active, are they an academic? And I define research activity, by the way, compliance level, 5 refereed articles or 5 refereed objects in a 5-year period. So very low level, 5 in 5 years is research activity. If you're below that, are you actually an academic? Just putting it out there, please disagree with me, offer comments in the comment section if you like. But what I'm talking about now is the volatility of the academic workforce. Peer review, editing, these are noble acts that have been conducted for free by generations of researchers so that we are able to continue that research conversation, right? But as publishers like Elsevier and Springer become 2 of the most profitable corporations in the world, and that profit is based on the free labour of academics, we have to ask ourselves what exactly we're doing here. Now, that free peer review, that free academic labour was absolutely fine when academics were on full-time, permanent or tenured contracts, okay? This was about service. We were given the gift of tenure, and therefore we serve our intellectual community. But those days are long, long over. And all of us are on short-term contracts, as I've said thousands of times. We're all the precariat now. We're all one day away from getting the sack. And we've got a large number of our colleagues on part-time casualised jobs battling to find food security or housing security. And of course, ironically, I've performed this through many of the videos that you've seen. My degree of housing insecurity you've seen in these videos. So I'm currently in a temporary accommodation. This is the last week I'll be in this particular temporary accommodation, and then next week I'm moving to another place to live. So I am writing my research on a wonky table in temporary accommodation day after day, week after week. And I am not alone. This is the reality of a researcher's life now. So, through these tough times to be a researcher, the pursuit of knowledge has never mattered more. We need you, and we need your high quality research. In a time of fake news, in a time of, I'm going there, alternative facts, wow. A time of Twitter pylons and photo opportunities rather than rigour. The quiet, distinguished and careful work of a researcher must be respected. It'll rarely be supported by governments because it rarely creates those quick outputs, those quick outcomes that create profit for particular industries. But this is courageous work in a time of cowardice and ignorance and foolishness. You, as a researcher, you are the best of us, and you will move us to a different future. I wish you love, light, and peace. Tea out.